This is Green is the New Black, a podcast by Oikos Lisbon. My name is Jesna, and I'm bringing you today's episode from my laptop so we can socially distance. So in today's episode, we have Luís Amado as our guest. Luís worked on different projects focusing on energy, life sciences, sustainability, and social corporate responsibility. He is currently the executive director at B Corp Portugal. Luís, we're very happy to have you as a guest at Green is the New Black. Thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, so since the topic of today's episode is the B Corp movement, I think we should start by getting to know B Corp. Luís, can you explain the basic concept of B Corp to us?
Sure. The basic concept of B Corp is that companies can be a force for good in the world. And one of the biggest forces, if we think of it, because nowadays companies sometimes even rule more than governments. So having that in mind, someone a couple of years ago that have founded a company very successfully decided to create a set of tools that now evolve to a movement based on those tools that allow companies to manage for impact and to be able to measure their impact. And also at the same time they are measuring, benchmark with the others and learn about the best practices that they can use to create that positive impact and actually becoming a force for good. Of course, that is not restricted to the tools, because nowadays we have a community that interact with each other, that organizes events, that creates content, documents, case studies that are shared and interacts with governments, showing how the things have been done and how they can be done better for the future, etc.
Okay, so it's not a competitive environment, but more of a community of helping each other to get more sustainable and be a better company, right?
Completely. It's completely on the spirit. There is a declaration that companies sign when they join that is called the Interdependence Declaration, in which everyone assumes that they are interdependent with each other, and as we are as human beings in the planet, interdependent with all the others.
Yeah, that's a very cool system. I really like it. Okay, so there's B Corp and there's the B Lab.
Sure.
What exactly is the difference? How do they work together?
Yeah, that's very interesting, and sometimes for us is a challenge in communication, because B Corp is more known, and actually we call it the B Corp movement. And the companies that are certified under the after doing these assessments are the B Corps, and they are the essence of the movement. The B Lab is an NGO that is actually the structure behind the movement. So it's the structure managing the B Corp movement is called B Lab, are the people who improve the assessments every day, that deal with verifying the data that were submitted for the certification, that create community, that make companies interact, that come up with the different events, the different information sharing, etc. So it's like the supporting structure for the B Corp movement that is composed now by almost 4,000 companies all over the world.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so I've seen a lot of companies, big companies that have the B Corp certificate on their website or somewhere where you can see it. But there are also different kind of certificates that you get. Often I see like fair trade or PETA approved. What do you think is the biggest or the main difference between being a B Corp and having a PETA certificate or a fair trade certificate?
Yeah. As I already start mentioning, we base the movement in a tool that then companies can use that tool. That is an open tool. Everyone can go there and sign in with just a few data about where they are located, the size of the company, and the working area. So they can use that tool, and if they think it's valuable for them and they have more than 80 points, they can, in a few other requirements, but basically in terms of scoring, that's the key one, they can ask for the certification. So the certification is something that happens along the way and might not even happen, and people are using the tool and still improving and creating more impact because the tool allows them to do that, identifying the best practices, namely in multiple choice questions in which you can see which ones have the higher score, so you can learn what is the next step that will increase your impact.
Okay.
In that sense, it's not something that you ask a consultant to help you doing, because you don't need to change a lot of things. You just create some documents, and then it's one thing that is done once in a life, and you get a stamp, and then you can use it. It's something that you need to be involved in terms of your company and your team. It goes through different areas of the company and usually incorporates all the other certificates that companies have. So the impact that we measure with the impact assessment also contemplates all those other certificates, because they are valuable, but not as global as the approach of the impact assessment. There is, for example, a certificate more about the supply chain, like the fair trade, that can be incorporated and give like increased score for the impact assessment, but are only for a sector of the company. And then the impact assessment is broader. So the B Corp certificate encompasses all of those. There's like some companies ask me about the EcoVeritas certificate. Why should I have B Corp? And I tell them, well, I have companies that are EcoVeritas certificate and approach me because they want to be B Corp, because they understood that is like the next step to encompass the whole company and not only some sectors that are not more addressed more carefully with some of the certificates. And I have a lot of companies doing like ISOs and B Corp at the same time, because they are in a certain way aligned in terms of transparency, good processes, but not involving the same areas. And so if you have the B Corp, you have all the company covered by because the different areas, the governance, workers, community, environment, and customers allow you to cover the company as a whole.
So supply chain, sustainability, transparency. Yeah. What else? Those three or more?
No, we have the B impact assessment is divided in 5 different sections. That is the governance, the workers, the community, the environment, and the customers. Okay. Of course, that what you mentioned, sustainability, is a difficult word because it means different things to different people. But yes, efficiency, good use of resources is something that is always transversal and present in every area. So the assessment is done in a way that in which companies are challenged about certain issues, but not giving recipes about how to solve them. The recipes, companies should create them and then provide the evidence that they are working and creating impact. So that's basically the challenge for companies to reflect a bit in the way they are behaving in the different areas, but always with concrete suggestions in terms of what is the next step, what the others are already doing. Example, I'm worried about the sustainability of my supply chain. I'm using the word sustainability, but never mind. Let's let it go. And I should show that I have a suppliers policy that the suppliers sign and know about, that covers the areas that I think are relevant for sustainability, being them social, being them proximity, being them not having child labor, etc.
Okay.
This is the kind of issues that are usually addressed in the different points of the assessment. So very practical ones in terms of what I do to create impact.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's a very good thing that you have to say what exactly you're doing to reach your goal to be more sustainable, whatever that means in your supply chain. I think that's a very good idea. So how do you think the assessment makes it possible that different companies focusing on different, I don't know, a company that produces food or a IT company, that they both can be a B Corp? Do you know how it's made possible?
Yeah, there is like the initial data that I told you that companies need to provide, like the size, the area in which they work, and the location in terms of geography. Customizes the assessment so they don't get like stupid questions, like asking about fertilizers to a law firm. That's something that doesn't make sense. But if you are an agricultural company, they would get some questions about the kind of fertilizers they use. So the 5 areas are always covered in detail, but taking into account those differences in terms of the size of the company. And the assessment is designed in a way in which depending on what you answer to one question, some others will open or not, depending on your previous answer.
Okay,
So
so it's not.
if you say I don't have my own facilities, so a lot of questions about how do you improve the energy efficiency, water, etc. in your facilities do not appear anymore. If you have your own facilities, okay, you get a lot of more questions about that. If you are an industry, you have a lot of more questions about all the structure that is behind the production of your products. If you are a service company, you don't get those questions.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not a universal assessment.
It's a universal but not a standard one.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
so
yeah.
usually people ask me, can you send me the standard version of the assessment? And I say, no, I cannot. You have to sign in to register your company, and then you have the assessment for your company.
Okay, very nice. Okay. I've already talked that I've seen on some websites that they are B Corp, like Ben and Jerry's, I think is a very famous one, and they're very big.
Yes.
But also I've seen some smaller companies saying that they want to be one, but they are rather small. They cannot afford the fee that you have to pay for becoming a B Corp.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is a relevant aspect? This is a good excuse, or whatever you want to call it, to not be part of the movement, to not have the B Corp certificate?
No, I think that might be either not willing to give the right value to the things on one side, and I will try to explain you what I'm saying with an example, or not knowing exactly what the fees are.
Okay.
Because the fees are always less than 1% of the revenues, and usually even less than 0.1% of the revenues of the companies. Okay. So I think it's not a big issue if you think this gives you added value. They even encompass the idea that if the company has a bad year, they will pay less because they are bounded to the revenues of the previous year. So, for example, now during this pandemic that we are living, we know that some companies suffered, and we thought, well, we need to support them and let them pay less. But then we realized that is already in the model that we use, that they will not pay because they have not had the revenues they used to have. That is the first thing. The other one I was telling you is that people sometimes, and I already said that those conversations, were telling me, but that's a bit expensive. And I told them, well, do your calculations. Are you not willing to pay one coffee to your employees during each day of the year? And they then realized that was the value that was at the table. Okay, like one coffee per employee per year would be enough to pay the fee. Yeah. And sometimes even that was the situation. They were telling me that was expensive. Okay. So sometimes people tend to approach things in a different perspective, and they come up with those maybe excuses because they are not seeing one in perspective, and sometimes not, maybe it doesn't have the value for them that there's not well perceived, and that is also a challenge for us to make that value perceived by the companies that are willing to become a B Corp. I would say that the cost that companies have if they account the hours that they need to use to do the assessment is, if not always, most of the times bigger than the fees. Okay. Yeah. What exactly does B Corp or the B Lab does with the fees that they're getting? We use the fees, and they are not enough. We are an NGO, and we still need to have some donations to support the structure. But we use those to pay the team that is behind, evaluating the information that is submitted for the companies that want to be certified, promoting the communication of the movement, organizing events, what else? Supporting the companies that are doing the assessment in the initial stages, like the things that we were talking. How much does it cost? What are the next steps? What are the things that I need to do to be eligible? So there is usually a team that supports those initial stages, and also then later on in terms of the recertification, because companies should submit again the assessment to be evaluated and confirm the information that was inserted every 3 years. So there is always an ongoing work in that sense as well.
Okay, so these are all just parts of the work that has to be done by the B Corp or the B Lab to become a B Corp. It's all
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
work
it's the work that supports
that has
the
to be done.
certification
Yeah.
process, and also the management of the community as a whole, the creation of the events, the interaction with the legal entities, namely some governments trying to change a few things, etc. So it's basically to support that team. And yeah, since fees are quite low, we still need to figure out how to finance ourselves in different ways.
Yeah, that's understandable. Okay. Thank you so far for your input on the B Corp movement. I think we should move on to another issue related to
Just let me say two things that I skipped a while ago. That was about the requirements. I mentioned the 80. I mentioned the 80 points.
Yes.
That is one of the requirements. The other is the company has more than 12 months of operations, because during the assessment some questions are made about the previous year. So if you don't have 12 months of operations, you don't have a previous year, so you cannot answer them. And the other is willing to comply with some legal requirements that are requested. That is to change your bylaws to reflect that your company is managing for all the stakeholders and not only for the shareholders. Those legal requirements depend on the country you are in. In some countries, there are a legal entity called benefit corporation. In those countries, that is the legal requirement. In some others in which this legal form doesn't exist, there are some wording that is asked for companies to incorporate in their bylaws. But the ones that have startups are not left behind. They don't have 12 months, so they cannot be B Corp because they cannot fill in the full assessment. But we've created a status that we called pending B Corp that allows them to be part of the movement since the beginning. Okay. And I already came across people that told me, Luís, I will going to start a company, and I did my business model based on the B impact assessment because it helped me to structure my ideas. And those are more and more frequent nowadays, and they are called pending B Corps. The only thing they have to do is to incorporate in their bylaws from the beginning these legal requirements, and then do the assessment the best they can, so that they know what they can expect in the future. But that assessment will not be assessed by the team in terms of the information until they have 1 year old.
Yeah, but I think it's a very good way for startups, new companies to be sustainable or be a B Corp from the beginning by work according to the tools and the laws that are connected to the B Corp movement.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you so far for your input on the B Corp movement. I think we can move on to another issue related to certificates and sustainability. So greenwashing is a big issue nowadays when talking about big corporation. This means that they use labels or even colors to seem sustainable and make the customer comfortable buying a product. But in real life, their actions aren't changing, or they're only changing very little. What do you think is the role of B Corp in working against greenwashing campaigns? Do you think they can handle that or work against that?
Yeah, that is something that we have very present every day, and is something that is key for us to be able to address. Otherwise, the certificate will lose the value that we think it has now, because it's based on credibility. And once the credibility is lost, the value is gone as well. So I agree that a lot of washing is going on, and it's being talked over and over. My point is always, from what I was telling you, you understand that this is not only a certificate, but a tool that allows you to measure your impact. And once you measure something, either you have it or not. I heard some people talking about impact washing, and I say, well, for me that doesn't make sense. Maybe it's because my scientific background makes me think that way. But for me, if you measure something, either it's there or not. And if you say it's there and it's not washing, it's a lie.
Yes.
It's like a company saying that I have 50 of revenues and they only have 10. It's not washing, it's lie. Yeah. So since these tools allow you to measure, they will prevent the washing, because people know exactly what we are talking about in terms of figures that can be compared to the others and are public. Every company that has become certified has a little file with the assessment, with the score in the different areas. And even if when they are working in areas that are that you can say a bit more problematic, they have to disclaim what they are doing in those areas. Example, water companies that sell bottled water in plastic bottles. They should say exactly what they are doing in terms of the plastic reduction and what are the plans for the next years, and that is available online for everyone to check.
Yeah,
and
okay.
if they are not doing that, and it already happened, people can address the B Lab, and those companies, some of them, fortunately, very few, but lost their certificates because they were not acting like they were claiming they were acting. Okay? That is one layer. There's this public scrutiny that I think is very effective. The other is that, like I was telling you, every 3 years they should resubmit, and the data should be again checked. So it's not a certification for life, like I was telling you a while ago. And aside from that, 10% of the companies that are certified are screened randomly every year.
Okay.
So if they are not behaving like they were saying, that would also be identified.
Yeah, I think it's a very good thing that you check them frequently, and well, you held them accountable for what they're doing.
Yeah, it has to do that way, because companies, like people, have lives, and the pathway changes, either because they were acquired, the shareholders changed, and so they might change. And so we need to make something very dynamic, because that's how life in companies, as in our daily life, it is. So
yeah, and it could even help them to get even better, because they want to be better on the next check, so they're really doing something to be better than last time.
I'm glad you picked that point, because that's a trend that we identified. This is actually a journey, and companies feel that way, because our pattern is that when companies become certified, they do not stop. They start increasing their score year by year. And we push that, in the sense that the new assessment is not the same as it was 3 years before, because every area is evolving, and we try to make the continuous improvements a trend. So we make the next assessment a bit more demanding. That meaning that the one that has 80 points and has done nothing probably will not recertify 3 years after, if he is not in the journey to become more impactful.
Yeah. Okay. So if in an ideal world, every company is a B Corp, what impact do you think this will have on different aspects, on the environment, on working conditions? What do you think will happen?
That is our dream. The day we become dispensable, because there is no need to have a B Lab anymore, because all companies are already B Corps, and that is a mandatory issue. That would make us dispensable, would be great. So like that's why maybe we are an NGO and not a company, because when a company ends, people get sad, the shareholders get sad. In here, we'll be happy because our job is done. But I can answer you that with some figures for 2020, for example. The global B Corp community during 2020 protected 200,000 hectares of land, offset 16 million tons of carbon, saved 225 million liters of water, diverted 207,000 metric tons of waste. And
that's
we could go over and over. It's only 4,000 companies. So imagine if we can propagate this to, let's say, the 200,000 that use now the B Impact assessment tool, and that we are not accounting, because those are the ones that are not certified yet. And this it is only for the certified community. But not being certified doesn't mean they are not doing the journey and using the tool to do that. So maybe in those 200,000 less 4,000, we'll have even more impact than this one that I'm sharing with you, because all the small bits count.
Yeah, it sounds like a very good future.
Yeah, that's what we think. And for me personally, one of the things that attracted me, and I was telling you at the beginning, is that companies are really a very strong force to change things. And and I feel we need to change things now, or it will be too late.
Yeah, totally. You can do it through governments and laws, but that's always a very long way to implement new laws. But companies doing something by themselves and being a B Corp, I think it's a very good way to change things a bit faster than through laws. Okay. Thank you for your answers on the B Corp. I think we can move on to you as a person, because and I believe our listeners too, are very curious about your job and how you got there. So you're the executive director at B Corp Portugal. What are you exactly doing there?
Okay, now I think you can figure out that I'm the executive director at blab Portugal, right?
Right, that's correct.
From what we talked,
Yes.
I'm working in the structure, and I've been alone promoting the movement in Portugal until previous month. Now I have someone helping me mainly in communication,
okay.
mainly in communication part. But so you can guess that I do everything. I usually joke and say you're speaking with the CEO and also with the doorman of the B Lab in Portugal, because
Okay.
I have to do a bit of everything. That bit of everything means doing the PR, the communication, trying to promote the movement, going and give talks at universities, at different events, doing the community management, being put companies in contact, the ones that have things that they might work together, a company that wants someone in IT and a company that has training people in IT, put them together so they can interact and create a common project, organize events in which we address themes that are interesting to those companies, namely, I remember some of them, diversity, different ways to address HR, so the companies can have people more committed to their jobs, and also deal with the more bureaucratic work, if we want to call it that way, that is supporting the tool. Someone that is doing the assessment and is not understanding a question, or don't know about the next steps, or the system doesn't allow me to change something that I need to change. That's another of the parts of my job that sometimes consumes me a lot of time, that I would like to be more efficient, but it's always needed to do so things can be pushed forward. And then the other more political side, if you want to call it that way, or stakeholders management, that is dealing with all the policies that can support the creation of the B Corps in the country, like creating promoting the benefit corporation or similar status, or even try to have, like when you go and do and incorporate a company in Empresa na hora, that you could immediately choose an option in which your bylaws would be according to the B Corp requisites. Those things that can facilitate is also part of my tasks. And then the management things, more financial ones, how the fees are being charged. There is someone that is not answering to the payment, or luckily enough doesn't happen a lot, but also have to have those like account things in place as well. So as you can see, it's pretty diverse and allows me to interact with a lot of different stakeholders and having
it's very impressive.
And learning about different stories and the different trends that are going on. So for you to have recently, I didn't mention that one, but in terms of promotion, a lot of times I'm asked to go to companies. Someone in a company identifies the tool as interesting, and then they ask me to go and help them sell internally. So I've been in a lot of board meetings explaining what the B Corp is, and in also partnerships with accelerators that want to promote the creation of new companies with impact. So all those interactions are.
So you're basically doing everything.
I have to, and trying to figure out a way of getting help. Now I'm having a very good help in communications.
Okay.
With Gudrun, that is being a great help.
So I already saw that you're kind of an all-rounder, because your education is very diverse. You have a degree in biotechnology, I saw that, but you also have a degree in business administration. So I think it's very diverse. So what was it that ultimately pushed you into the sustainable direction? Why do you wanted to be part of the B Lab? Or be the B Lab?
You're right. I've always been an all-rounder, and it's always been trouble to me to choose what degree should I take, etc. So I ended up choosing biotech, and then even did a PhD in genetics, and then started working in biotech companies, and so went to management. And then from the biotech, I went to a bit of renewables, because I started feeling that I would like to work in what we can call sustainability, because I felt that mainly two things. The need of efficiency is there, because otherwise we are too many for the planet in a couple of years. And so that's my view of sustainability, is doing more with less. That's basically what attracted me. And then I realized that being in different areas, there are tools and procedures in some areas that can be very valuable for other areas to become more efficient. And this was basically the scenario that made me address the sustainability. And then I also felt, by being involved in one foundation from a big corporation, that was sometimes a big disconnection within the organizations. There was like the good cap and the bad cap in the same organization. And for me, that's something that doesn't make sense. That's why then when I came across the B Lab and the tools that they developed, they were very aligned with my idea that a company should not exist if they do not create added value for the society as a whole, and not only for some of the society. And on the other part, they were taking away the things from the society. And so that's how basically I arrived in this path.
Yeah. Very interesting. Do you have any tips for people who want to work in a sustainable company? Do you think there are many degrees that are connected with sustainability? Do you think this is needed to work at B Lab or other sustainable companies?
I will share with you my experience, because I think at this stage, I doubt if anyone has a definite answer about that, because it's something quite new. My feeling is that, and I'm sharing what I feel to myself, is that we can work on sustainability in every company, as long as there is an open-minded on that company to change things. Even using the impact assessment tool, you can do an assessment and immediately identify the areas in which you can work. That's how I usually approach the issues with the companies. And then they can tell me, no, that doesn't make sense for me. Okay, we are different, and anyone can decide whatever they want. So in that sense, I think work in a sustainable company, would not be my approach. Would be working in sustainability is possible in every country, in every country, and in every company. An example that I came across, and I'd love that had happened within the B Corp movement. Unfortunately, it didn't, but it shows how drastic the changes can be, and how sustainable the performance of the companies can be. There was a company called Ørsted from the Nordic countries that was 7 years ago an oil company, and nowadays is 100% renewable energy company. Without losing profitability. And this shows how we can work in those companies. The other trend I see is people asking me, Luís, after doing the impact assessment, they identified how important it is to have someone responsible for all those areas and connecting the dots, and they want to call it either sustainability manager or whatever. And they ask me, Luís, who should I hire? And it's not easy to answer, because I always tell them, I think there is no time frame that allows us to say this guy has done a good job about that in here, because we don't have enough years now to figure that out. So what I usually say is that, okay, try to find some that is good at environment or HR, the area you think it's more relevant for you, and then try to make them learn a few other things, and have a global vision. So what I think it's relevant is, for me at first instance, is that you have maybe an engineering ahead in terms of structuring things and being able to learn and put up some projects, and also the management issue to understand how you can interact and influence the decision making, and what are the key inputs that are relevant for the company. So it's a bit the mix that I was telling you about, and that you identified as one of my trends. But I think that becomes more and more frequent, because now people have degrees that are just 3 years instead of the 5, at least usually here in Portugal, and they can do a different subject afterwards. And that complementary of subjects would help them to be more equipped with tools to address these, I think, very interesting challenges that, after all, come about doing less with more. And so you have to be savvy enough to identify the areas that you should address and put them in contact.
Okay, so you think you need the hard skills to structure and to plan something and have the know-how for example, engineering, but then you have to have the open mind to work to make it more sustainable, more fair, if you want to call it like that. So you need the hard skills and then have to add the open mind to work towards it, right?
Yeah, I would say so, that you will have the willingness to do less with more, and so to be able to identify and then to make them work together, the different areas of the company, for example, or even identify partners outside the companies that could provide you some more sustainable solutions, for example. So I would say that's something very important in terms of soft skills, is being able to understand the other side, to be able to put yourself on the other shoes, so you can interact better and create the links that are needed for future collaborations.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. I think you all gave us a lot of information on yourself, on B Corp, and maybe how to, what kind of decisions to make for us in the future if we want to work in that direction. So this is a podcast dealing with sustainability, obviously. So I want to ask you, someone who works towards making companies more sustainable, how do you look into the future regarding climate change? Are you rather optimistic or pessimistic, and why?
I'm balanced as a scientist by training. I have to take both parts, but I tend to be optimist because I think we have no other way.
Yes.
So I was recently asked if I think companies should rethink about their sustainability policy, or if there is something that they could not think. And I said, yes, they might not want to think if they don't want to have business in a couple of years. Because if we don't change, companies as we know, the world as we know it will end. So it's an easy decision. I want to cash in the next 5 or 10 years and then stop. Okay. But in terms of long term, I think that won't work. And in that sense, we see a lot of adaptations, a lot of changes going on. And I think we as a human community are plastic enough to be able to change things accordingly and to make the moves that are needed, that will have the planet as we know it, or even better for the next generations. I have 4 kids, and one of my drivers is that I want them to have a decent life in the future, and not having to struggle with a lot of things because the previous generations have exploited things in an unconscious way, and now they have to deal with the problems that they create. And they teach me every day a lot of things in terms of sometimes they wake up in the morning with their heads disaligned, and I try to calm them, and I need some water, and they are always turning off the water. You cannot waste water. So and the same, I live in the 2nd floor, and one of them usually tells me, you don't need to switch on the light, we can go without the light. Sometimes it's a challenge, but and these small things that we try to change in our life can do all the difference. And I see more and more the younger generations being worried about that, by the way they use the cars, by the way they eat, by the way they buy their clothes. If you go to the web, you can see people explaining, why do I buy a jacket from Patagonia and not from Tommy Hilfiger? And so all these things that I see changing make me being more optimistic. Even companies, we have great examples of companies like the one I told you about a while ago, and many others changing their business models. Even if we go to the big ones that used to be the bad guys, like the BP, changing all the mindset, coming up with a purpose much more aligned with all the stakeholders and with the positive input for the society. So I think it's a big challenge, and it's very urgent, and there is no time to be wasted, but I'm optimistic that we will be able to do it.
It makes me optimistic too. Maybe the pressure is needed for change for the companies. Well, at least for my assignments, it's like that. Maybe you need some pressure to change your behavior. Okay. Thank you very much, Luís, for joining us today. It was a pleasure talking to you, and we were very happy to have gained some insights into B Corp and You as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Congratulations
nice
on your
day.
work. And it
Thank
was a
you.
pleasure spending these long minutes with you. Whenever
Thank
you
you.
think it's useful, count on me.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That was Green is the New Black. Thank you for listening. We will see you in the next episode.